This is a space to share and discuss educational topics with guests who have a passion for teaching and an interest in learning. Hi, my name is Gina Gillen, and I want to welcome you to Coffee Talk. In this episode, we're going to talk about sociocracy and agility, how they complement each other, and what BOSSA Nova is. Today, we have the pleasure of talking to John Buck. He's the president of Governance Alive, LLC, certified sociocracy consultant, and author of With the People, Consenting to a Deeper Democracy, Company-Wide Agility with BOSSA Nova, and soon forthcoming Governance from Below, Can Children Lead the Way? Hi, John. Welcome to our Coffee Talk.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. Thanks, Gina.
Thank you so much. John, can you start by giving us more information about you?
Sure. When we were getting ready to have this little chat, we were talking about that. And I said, what do I say about myself? So you said, okay, talk about something about, your time in Agile. And I like teasing people because people generally think of software industry as being something that young people are in. Well, I remember dropping a card of IBM cards on the bottom of a computer or on the floor of a computer room. And then I like to tease people saying, well, how long do you think I've had an email account? And they'd say, oh, maybe 1990. I said, no, how about 1979 was the first one that was on a control data mainframe. I was working for the Federal Aviation Administration, and we had a little listserv, and we had email, and we manipulated the bureaucracy in the agency. It was lots of fun. And so I've been around computers for a long time. Actually, I have a fourth book that I published back in around 1985. It was about computer-based training because that was like, I really had a good time with that at the FAA. And I end the book saying there's no longer any doubt but that computers can be used to deliver training. And so it's like I've been around for a while.
That's amazing. And how do you feel now that everyone has access to a computer? Because that wasn't even thought about it before.
Yeah, I was co-led the Federal Computer-Based Training Consortium back in the 1980s. And we had electronics technicians in the FAA taking training online back in their locations instead of going to Oklahoma City and sitting around for 6 weeks. And we saved budget and everything else. We proved it really well. So we had a good time. I was running the second largest computer system in the agency at one point. They had the air traffic control system. And the computer-based training system had about 500 terminals around the agency. So anyway, I've done computer systems management. I've made a decision that I was a manager and I didn't have time to also be a good programmer. So I kind of, don't really know my way around the modern programming languages. But I've also kind of watched Agile emerge from the manifesto stage and watched the whole computer revolution coming out of the power of Agile and the capacity that brings. So it's just been fascinating to see it happen. So lots of other things I could say about myself, I guess, but I will say also that when I had my first job at Boeing as a technical writer way back, in the last century, it occurred to me that I liked my job. I liked, writing rivet manuals. I liked my boss. I liked the people I was working with. But I kind of shredded inside because I came back one day from voting for the mayor of Seattle and saying, why can't I vote for my boss? I would vote for my boss if I could. He's a great guy, but why can't I? Why are we?
Exactly.
There's a book here I've just been reading called Private Government. And it says, we really have all these autocratic governments around. They're called private industries. And I was saying, why can't we run it democratically? And I looked and went to the FAA and got on a management intern program and kept looking and couldn't find what I was looking for. Looked at the Modrigan system and all that. Said, no, that's not it. And I was over in Holland one time to give a speech about computer-based training. And was telling my host I couldn't find, anybody that ran a company democratically. And they said, it's been solved. Go see Gerard Endenberg down in Rotterdam. They're running a company down there with using something called Sociocracy, which is, democracy for organizations. So I went right down there and it was amazing. Gerard's a one-of-a-kind guy. And as he said, his family had been running an experiment in different management systems. And they had a company that was going well. I was doing heavy electrical engineering. And his parents decided to retire, and he left his job at Philips Electronics. He's the guy who got the patent for Philips on the flat speaker that's in your telephone. And so when he took over the company, he says he remembers looking at the power structure. He was the boss and the board like this. He said, this is called a power structure, but as an electrical engineer, I would never, ever design a power circuit that way. He said, it has no feedback loops. So what kind of a power structure is that? So we need to have feedback loops. And he said the feedback loops, if you're going to steer a company, you have to get feedback that you can't ignore. And so that was the whole development of sociocracy, the development of an upward system of decision-making that says that, you have to listen to the feedback, just like the feedback loop in your furnace on the little thermostat on your wall. When the temperature falls below a certain level, the furnace cannot ignore that. It has to turn on. It says, temperature's low, I got to turn on and warm the house back up. And so that's a good steering loop. And you don't have that in the way companies are run. So when they are run well, when they can be steered well with a good feedback loop, you get all kinds of great performance and you get a lot happier people. So, and that, along with the computer work that I was doing, kind of both grew up for me together. And I finally switched over to helping companies run more sensibly at some time in around 2007 or 8, something like that.
That's amazing. Then we also, for anyone that's going to be on the Agile Alliance event, you're also going to be there giving a conference. A session, right?
Yeah, we'll be in Nashville at the Agile Alliance. We've got a 3-hour workshop in the middle of the week, and then actually before that, I'll be down at the Scrum Days in Medellin in Colombia. And then probably we'll be doing a presentation in Denmark at the XP conference, although my co-author on the BOSSA Nova book, Jutta, is probably going to handle that herself. And then there's the Agile Testing Days in Potsdam, Germany in November. I'm really looking forward to going to that. So I'm definitely in the Agile world.
That's amazing. Now, with all that experience that you just mentioned, I love that you have so many years in Agile and some experience, also a lot of experience on Sociocracy. So how does Sociocracy complement Agile?
Yeah, I think if the Gerard Endenberg had been more connected to the computer industry, he might well have put what he was doing into the Agile form. They're closely related in that they want the people doing the work in charge of it. They encourage reflection, like the retrospective and planning meetings and all that, which was like before the Agile came along, was like nobody did that. You just worked. And so what Gerard came up with encourages that. The rapid prototyping, the testing, all that kind of thing is part of the engineering that he came up with. Where they differ is that Agile grew up in the IT shop. And so you have a bank with an IT shop having big fights with the management. The management says, here's all this money, have us a system in 18 months, tell us how you're going to do it. And the IT shop says, well, we'll tell you what we'll do in a couple of weeks, but I don't know when we're going to do it. We don't know how much it's going to cost. And the bank managers are like, what are you talking about? We're going to fire you. And they say, fine, you can just get the same guys, in next week, say the same thing. And so there's this collision of cultures and methodologies. And Sociocracy says, let's be Agile for the whole company. Let's have the whole company have the feedback loops, the fast learning that happens in Agile for the whole company. And so when Jutta Eckstein, who's like a super duper Agile expert, and I decided to write the book on how they combine, we realized that just we actually gave a presentation at an Agile conference talking about how they're similar, but Sociocracy can take you outside of the immediate Agile shop, with principles like double linking. We started, writing a book about it after we did this conference presentation together. As we thought about it, we said, no, this isn't everything. There's more stuff. And so we looked around at a lot of different methodologies, and we picked out beyond budgeting and open space, because there were companies at that time who were using those as the basis of how they were running the companies. And there were other things like Theory U or something like that is a nice theory, but nobody's running a company with it. And so we said, okay, we'll pull these in and we'll mix them all together, and we will kind of generalize the Agile Manifesto principles. And so, like, self-organization is how we and I've got notes over here because I can't ever get this, but is the individuals and interaction, which is the Agile principle. What are their 4 principles? We said, let's call this self-organization, because it means that, we're all working together. And when individuals and people are working together, then regardless of what you're doing, they're self-organizing. Or working software, if you're generalizing to a restaurant, you can't tell the chef, you got to have working software. It's like they don't do working software. So we said transparency, just like what you're actually delivering, you show the customer, and don't give them a bunch of other stuff, and so on. So we generalized that into constant customer focus for customer collaboration, and continuous learning for responding to change as ways of generalizing. And that let us bring in things like, how do you actually manage a budget? If you have a IT shop that's in a company has an annual budget, you're not agile as a company. You can actually make budgets agile, and they get in there supporting what's happening rather than saying, no, you can't spend more than this without giving us 6 months notice and all that. That's not agile. And there's this wonderful methodology that grew up out of the oil industry in Norway that lets you run that part of the company in a very supportive way. They also, beyond budgeting, has something to say about being very flexible in the HR department also. So it's great. I encourage you to get familiar with it. And then the open space, the Agile's kind of almost there, that everybody just gets together without a supervisor for the sprints and all that. But the methodology, particularly when you get it into the company, like they do with Spotify, where if you got an idea and you got a couple of people together, you're off and running with it. A big open space event is kind of fun. When ING decided they were going to no longer be a bank, but they were going to be a software company that did banking, that meant a lot of changes in the company. And so they put 10,000 people in Ajax football stadium in Amsterdam and said, go to it, open space, reorganize the company. And they did, they pulled it through. So it goes beyond some of the self-organizing that you see in the traditional Agile. And it calls on people's passions and dreams. And so that's really important. So we combined the 4 of them, and we realized that B for beyond budgeting, and OS for open space, and S for sociocracy, and A was BOSSA, which is wave in Portuguese. And BOSSA Nova is a nice dance. And so we said, okay, we'll call the new method BOSSA Nova. And let's have a party here. And that's how we came up with that word.
So I've been watching some of your conferences that you have done in the past, and then you always mention the VUCA. If I'm not mistaken, it's a Portuguese word. But do you think that BOSSA Nova can help us deal with VUCA?
Yeah, the VUCA is sort of beyond complexity, but I like mostly complexity theory. There's not so much theories of ambiguity or volatility, but there are lots of theories about complexity. And yes, the Snowden is very well known for his work on the complexity theory. There's also some other people like Stacy, who has a different view on complexity theory. There's the methodology of human systems dynamics that has some very practical tools about how you can actually, by the way you organize people, increase or decrease the amount of complexity that's happening, the amount of interactions. And so it's actually, of all of them, it provides maybe one of the most powerful tools to think about, okay, how much of self-organization do we want? How much do we want things overwhelmed and so forth? And so, but Snowden talks about, if you have a complicated system, then you analyze it real well, and you then decide what to do. Like an airplane is a very complicated system, and if there something breaks, then you can analyze where you want to go. It may take an expert to do it, but you can figure it out. With complexity, the cause and effect disappears. You can't really tell, is this causing this? You can tell patterns. And so what you can do is what's called probes. Let's do an experiment and say, all right, if we do this, do we get that? Do we have a strange attractor here? Some pattern that's we can see that we may be able to simplify into complicated, but maybe not. Maybe we just know that these things tend to go together. And in that way, you can do lots in terms of handling complexity that may seem overwhelming to you otherwise.
Yes, thank you so much. And now something that you just mentioned, I was going to ask you that, if I'm not mistaken, if you want to implement BOSSA Nova, you have to implement probing. So can you provide the best practices to actually implement the probing method? Sure.
The what we did in the first part of our book was talk about the four different methodologies that I mentioned, and what it means to generalize the manifesto principles to incorporate the wisdom of these different approaches. We at one point came up with a chart that we didn't put in the book, where we said, okay, here's the four agile principles, and here's beyond budgeting and open space and so forth. And you can translate each of the manifesto principles into beyond budgeting speak and so forth. So they each give different perspectives on it. And so then we said, okay, we've looked at the techniques, we've given some framework, some theory, and now how do you apply that to your current situation? And we started teaching people, okay, how do you probe? And started thinking, everybody knows the scientific method. We'll just, you just use the scientific method. You come up with a hypothesis, you think. You consider what's going on, which is the reflective thinking. You come up with a hypothesis and an experiment. You do the experiment, you publish it. Yeah, easy. What we discovered is that nobody remembers their science training. And in the training we were doing, we literally went back and got videos that were designed for 8th graders about what's the scientific method. It's like, this is what you're doing. And everybody's used to thinking of it maybe in a technical area. Yeah, okay, we have controls and all that kind of thing. But doing it in a context with people just weren't trained to do that. And so it's like really just science 101, like you learned in 8th grade, but you have to really follow the discipline. And it starts with thinking about how you're thinking. This is Ralph Stacey talking about complexity. It's called reflexive inquiry. And what you could do is go look in the Wikipedia for 50, it says, what is it? Mental biases. And they have a list of 50 of them. It's like, gee, the harder I try, the better I'm going to do. No, that's not true. And there's, just all kinds of examples of everyday things where our reality is not reality. It's what we invent as reality. And so you need to think about, why am I thinking that way? We have this set of problems. Well, okay, what's the problem mean to us? Not, okay, we get in here, this is the guts of the problem. But what you're trying to do is do transformative learning. It's like where the framework you're thinking from suddenly shifts and you go, oh, I didn't think of it that way. One of my favorite quick demonstration of transformative learning is getting people to look up and put their finger in the air like this, going in a circle clockwise. And then I tell them beforehand, I'm going to yell at you. I'll yell at you. Why are you going counterclockwise? I told you to go clockwise. And everybody's, well, I am like that. And so then I get them to lower their finger like this. And suddenly they see that they're actually going counterclockwise when they look at the end of their finger this way. I said, well, I was just looking from the ceiling down on you and you weren't listening to me. So that's a framework shift. You assume this is where you're going, but you're actually also going counterclockwise. And so that's the first step, is thinking about how we're thinking. And then you say, like, for example, we've noticed that people in our company, we give them big budgets, but when they go traveling, we don't trust them. We make them, give all this detailed stuff, like approvals and all
reports.
So why are we trusting people with a $1 million budget, but not when they go traveling? What's wrong with this picture? Maybe trust is cheaper. So you come up with a hypothesis. Your probe is trust cheaper? And so then you have an hypothesis that if we get rid of all these rules and just give people little guidelines, like take care of yourself, be fiscal, be reasonable, be legal, just go, and do put in your expenses, but you don't have to get approval. Just go do it. And companies literally have now probed that. You set up an experiment, like you maybe start with a couple of departments and say, you all can go that way. Everybody else has to go the old way. You do a survey beforehand. Do you feel trusted? How do you feel about the expense system? How much has it been costing? And you let them go. And do the people who don't have all those constraints feel better about it? Do they spend less? And there's definitely companies that have done that, and it's cheaper. You don't have to have all these accountant people, processing all this stuff. They spend less. And so then you found that out with your test group. All right, now it's time to do it for the whole company and, measure again. And an important thing is that you need to publish what you're doing. If it's company secret, you just kind of publish it within the company, maybe. If you can go to a conference and get the company secrets out and tell people about it, they then can replicate what you're doing or try to replicate it and tell you, hey, we did it and we tried this variation, it worked even better, or we didn't get that, what were you doing? And that's a really important part of the scientific process. All the scientists are out trying to get their papers published. You need to be doing that too, even if it's just publishing it internally. And then from the publications and from how the experiment happened, you go back and reflect again. So it's a cycle. And that's how you probe. The probe is really the thinking process, coming up with a hypothesis and then running the experiment. That's a probe.
Thank you so much. Now, what is your number one advice to our community of lifelong learners who want to implement company-wide agility?
Oh, go read John Myatt's book. I mean, that's real simple. I think the one piece of advice is what I was just kind of implying there, which was like, you can apply the scientific method to your company, and it's a discipline, and everybody should be experimenters in your company. And go back and learn what that is and think about how to do that. And you'll find that it's important to have the framework, the theoretical framework, to encourage you to come up with questions. And wow, that works over there. Does it work over here? But that's what's not really taught when you go and got a job. It's like, how do you experiment? It's not like, here's your job. This is your parameters. Just go do that. And experiments can be done from the very top of the company to the very bottom. And often experiments will grow, and they can start at the very lowest level. We had a call from an IT company in Brazil recently, and he said, you guys, I owe you a thank you. 5 years ago, I read your BOSSA Nova book, and we started, and one of the groups in the company started sharing their salaries one day. We were going, why are they sharing salaries? And then some of their buddies were, and that's escalated to the point, or grown to the point, where we just finished a company-wide meeting, 75 people talking about, among other things, what salaries should we be getting? Let's organize our salaries together. He said, we never would have thought of that. And people love it. So it can start from any place, but you need to bring that the culture of disciplined experimentation into the company. So go watch that 8th grade film.
I completely agree with you, especially because transparency, and when people get hurt, they feel like they matter. So I love that example that you just gave us. But let me actually ask you a question. So we have Beyond Budgeting, BOSSA Nova. We have Beyond Budgeting. We have Open Space, Sociocracy, Agile, and did I forget? No, I think those are them, right? But is it necessary for you to apply all of them to see the result, or can you start like little by little?
The first company to use all 4 methodologies is a group in Taiwan and Singapore. And Titansoft, thank you. Yes, I couldn't think. I knew it was a T, but I couldn't think of it. So we can go back again. Okay. So they were the first company. Their motto is "We never stop learning. We never stop developing." And they're the first one that we know of who actually consciously uses all 4 methods. There's a company called Link in Switzerland, I think, is using it, and we've now lost track. We don't know how many people are actually using all 4 of them. Just studying one of them is fine. Study a couple of them, but the reason that we're mentioning them is because it gives you different viewpoints, different perspectives, and that helps you come up with good probes, helps you think, because like you think, oh, what happens if we did like they do in that company over there, like the travel thing, or what happens if we experiment with transformative learning and do consciously. But that's one of our probes that we mentioned in the book. So it just gives you a framework to help experiment better. Experimentation without a framework, so you're not testing something, is not so good. You're much more hit and miss. That's why theory is an important part of science. It's like, okay, given this, let's do that.
Thank you so much. I had a lot of fun. Again, I love this coffee talk because we're always focused on agility. But it's nice to bring all their frameworks and see how they complement. And BOSSA Nova, it's amazing. So are you guys planning on doing like a experiment on following on these companies to see how they do afterwards?
That's so obvious. I feel like, duh. Of course, we need to. There needs to be some sort of reporting back. The problem with selling a book is you really don't know who bought the book. But we have been selling it on LeanPub. We might be able to get back to them and say, would you please give us a report? Yeah.
That would be amazing to see. I was reading all your reviews and everyone loves them. But like you just mentioned, I think only 2 companies you said are working on it. But it would be nice to see how they're doing, other companies implementing it again. As you mentioned, you don't have to implement the 4 frameworks at the same time. So it would be nice to see if you do Sociocracy first and then agility and then Sociocracy and then Open Space. And then, that it would be nice to see how people
I love it. It's so obvious. I don't know why I didn't think of it. Of course. Yes, we can. And we can definitely get to LeanPub. We can put out Twitter messages saying, if you read the book and tried it, please, report back to us. It's our experiment.
Thank you so much for all your knowledge. So now, where can we find you if we want to know more about you?
Okay. On LinkedIn, it's John-Buck. You can write to contact@governancealive.com. Our website is governancealive.com. There's a place to send a note there. And that'll get you to me.
Thank you so much, John. And I hope you have fun in Colombia, in Nashville. We're actually going to be there. So cool. We'll see you there. And thank you so much again. And we'll hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
I'll look for you. Take care. Bye-bye.
We thank those who choose to be here, and we hope this space has been an inspiration to promote the professional growth of our community. If you want to know more about our certifications, visit us at certiprof.com. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter as SortoProf. Let us know in the comments below what other topics you would like us to discuss. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell to know about our upcoming episodes. See you in the next episode.